is Friday, February 15th, 2019. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was a very unexpected Get Your Ass Kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Friday. I just want to start off by going ahead and re-thanking Mr. Mike DeWitt and everybody else over there at the 10th Planet Springfield. You guys came in a pinch and were nothing but welcoming and very, very patient, and certainly with somebody who's as lame as I am at jiu-jitsu, it's certainly necessary to have a little more patience in there. Nonetheless, I had a fantastic time, got an excellent workout, learned quite a bit for the brief period of time that I actually spent in there. And I'll definitely be visiting again. Like I said, very, very professional, very, very to the point, very, very, very patient. And that's, I've always had a little bit of trouble with some coordination issues. And so, having somebody there that is willing to just like sit there and talk you through one or two reps and, make sure you're doing it right, that feels really good, And plus, this is a mild transition. I'm used to doing gi jiu-jitsu, although nothing that we did today was exclusively for no-gi. It's one of the things that I really like about no-gi jiu-jitsu. There's certain things in gi jiu-jitsu that don't translate over into non-gi jiu-jitsu, but almost every single thing in non-gi jiu-jitsu translates over into gi jiu-jitsu. So it's one of those things. So we were doing an interesting kind of a smashy pass and like a transition from there. I don't know if I'd really call it a smash pass. So you put your right hand on the knee and your left hand on the ankle, and this is like facing your opponent with an open guard, right? And you're standing, and you press the leg down. You kind of rotate out to that side, and then you do like an inside knee slice right across their leg to navigate around to the back, let the leg go over the top, hold the thigh in tight, and kind of ball them up into a nice side control position with them up on their side. And then we transition from that all the way over and through into the back mount and the choke. And my opponent was about as about the same size and build as I was, which was really comforting because it's one of the things I run into at my gym is that there are people my size and whatnot, but they're a little rarer. Most of the time I'm either with somebody who's slightly bigger than me or slightly smaller than me, or a little more than slightly. And so, sometimes I have to take it especially easy, and that's fine and all, but one of the things is that it gets me kind of oriented to a game that I'm not really going to be applying to somebody that's equal size or bigger. And chances are in like competition and whatnot, I'll probably be facing somebody my size or bigger. At least that's been the case so far. So I feel like I really got to be training for bigger guys. And that's one of the things I tried to do last Wednesday is be more conscientious about how I was picking my training partners, and trying to match myself with somebody at least my size, and if not my size, at least in excess of my skill level. And so I feel like that's probably going to do the most to kind of help me push forward and get out of this rut, But it was really funny because I did take actually a little bit of convincing to go over there. I won't lie, I've got a little bit of intimidation with regard to going to other gyms and whatnot. And it's just lack of confidence in my own ability as a jiu-jitsu player. It's like, I realize that there are a lot of people that are better than me, and I don't like go around like cock of the walk and be like, oh yeah, I can kick everybody's ass, because I know there's that guy right around the corner to be like, oh really, let's go, and prove me wrong. And so I'm always really tentative about that. But nonetheless, like I said, they were very, very welcoming, very, very patient, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly. So thank you again, Mike. Your people are great. And as far as what we're going to get into today, Haven't the slightest clue. I got a whole bunch of tabs open, and I'm sure I'll be able to winnow it down. I don't want to be talking about like Craig or any of that other crap today. I mean, because honestly, I think we've beaten that horse dead this week. If we didn't, somebody else did, and I don't want to play around in somebody else's kill. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw it down. And we haven't been opening it up with any body count lately, and there's something wrong with that. We're gonna have to fix that. And so here it is, the Ski Mask way, first dance, here on Coin Metal. And that was Killing Joke with Autonomous Zone. Yeah. And so, let's get into our articles. I don't know what it is about the cryptosphere, but there's something about it that, like, people think they can just, like, talk shit to you and be like, oh, you don't understand what you're talking about. It doesn't matter if they actually know what they're talking about, or they've actually done the thing that they're talking about, that they're trying to lord over you, like they actually know what the fuck they're talking about. It doesn't matter. The same shit happened, man. It's like, if you have something like concrete to say to somebody that diffuses their argument, then just say that. Rather than like acting all lordy over and be like, oh yeah, well, you're just a fucking idiot and you don't know what you're talking about. If you're trying to interest me in your project or what it is that you're doing, if you're trying to change my mind about what's going on in my mind, and like if you're trying to educate me or whatever, that's not the way you do it. I'm sorry to say, but acting like a dick and pointing down at somebody is not actually the way to do that. If you're trying to sway them and give them maybe a better understanding, like maybe there's something you're reading what they're saying and you're like, you know what, I think I know why this person is having this conceptual difficulty. And if you don't understand the conceptual difficulty that they're having, ask questions. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, a lot of times, the statements that you want to make can be just as easily phrased as questions. And they can be phrased as questions that don't actually cost you any face. If you're very specific in the thing that you're asking, it will go the furthest to help them understand the conceptual difficulty you're having, or expose the one that that they're having. One of the two. But it's a lot better than going around saying, "Oh, you're a fucking idiot. You're just fucking ignorant, man." That doesn't do anything for anybody. And you got to understand that if you're having that kind of conceptual difficulty with somebody else, chances are there is somebody else on planet Earth that's having the same conceptual difficulty that they are. So if you bother to explain it, chances are you probably won't have to bother to explain it again, because the people that are actually interested in it and are actually following it will have an opportunity to reflect on the conversation and say, oh, I see what was now I understand where I was fucking up. Now I see the big glaring spot in my understanding of this thing. That does so much more for everybody else. But see, when you say shit like, oh, you're just ignorant, you don't understand what you're talking about, what you're really saying is, I don't care if you understand what you're talking about. I'm happier if you're ignorant. I would rather you be ignorant and just be subject to what I want to feed you, because if you knew what I was trying to feed you, then you might choose a different thing other than me feeding it to you. That's what you're telling me. And because there are other options out there, and they're not as big a dick to people, I'm probably more inclined to go with them. Something to keep in mind when you're trying to sell your coin or your project or your advancement on a coin or whatever. Anyway, saw some saucy Twitter feed this morning going on between Verge Dev and Mr. Fluffy Pony, and I thought it was kind of interesting because he started going after me because I misstated something. I said that I'd been using Bitcoin since 2009. That's not technically true. Technically, I was mining back then, not using it. There you go. You got me, big guy. You busted me. Anyway, but it got me thinking, though, and I was really surprised nobody brought it up, because it is my favorite jab at Monero, is how much of their network is actually botnets. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe Mr. Fluffy Pony isn't a little salty about this latest development. I'm just joking, by the way. I'm sure he probably doesn't even know about this thing. Anyway, it's on blocked.com, blokt.com. Mozilla will now block crypto miners on Firefox by default. And this is by Viraj Shah, authored February 6th. So it's a little teeny tiny old, but, it's still new enough. Continuing on. Mozilla's latest version of Firefox features enhanced tracking protection while providing more content blocking options to the users. The upcoming browser version 67 could also block cryptocurrency miners by default, adding more protection to the users. What is Mozilla up to? Mozilla is working on browser version 67 to enhance the safety of the users. It will add more blocking options for the browser, which will fight against fingerprint printers and crypto miners. The work on these features has already started, but it will take some time before being brought to the nightly builds of the browser rather. As Firefox 67 is scheduled for May 14th launch, the new features will be given to the public testers soon. Handling crypto mining problems. Mozilla became concerned with blocking crypto mining scripts in the browser in the middle of 2018, and this feature was expected to launch with the Firefox 63 browser. However, it has since been delayed. In an August 30th post, Mozilla's Vice President of Product, Nick Nugent, noted, quote, "Some trackers fingerprint users, a technique that allows them to identify users by their device properties invisibly, and which users are unable to control. Other sites have deployed crypto mining scripts that silently mine cryptocurrencies on the user's device." Monero. Practices like these make the web a more hostile place to be. Future versions of Firefox will block these practices by default. Opera was the first browser to block crypto miners. In early January 2018, the company introduced cryptocurrency block scripts for mobile devices. The feature is activated by default and with the ad blocking feature of the browser, which provides added protection against cryptojacking. Google also tried to restrict the infiltration of crypto miners by removing all extensions that could have powered such activities. Yeah, I wonder if that's impacting Monero's mining at all. But hey, it seems they actually got kind of proactive about it, I think. I'd read something about it, I want to say like 2 to 4 months ago, where they were getting kind of proactive about it, because that does leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth when behind the scenes your browser, whatever, it's been injected with some fucking JavaScript miner, and you're actually part of some fucking global botnet mining Monero for some asshole. Like I said, it reflects poorly on you. And the thing is, though, it wasn't just Monero that this has been done to. There have actually been several cryptocurrencies that have been mined in the background. And we've actually been hearing about such projects since as early as like 2015, 2016, with shadow mining being implanted in either a game or a game platform such as Steam. And of course, I'm sure we have not seen the last of such scams. Or not really scams, but attacks rather. Because it is it's a hack kind of attack kind of thing. But nonetheless, we will see more of them. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the things I always bag on people about when, or I bring up when people are talking about like smart homes or something to that effect, where you'll find out one day that your entire house is mining Monero for somebody else, or Dogecoin or some shit like that. But I've been joking about that since, oh shit. Back when it was it was known as shadow mining or ghost mining, and my first jokes about that were that one of these days Dick Cheney's pacemaker would be mining Doge, but he kind of averted that. He managed to find him a heart. So, anywho. So yeah, apparently Mozilla is finally stepping up to the plate. I got the impression that this was like, something new that browser developers were doing, but apparently not. And so kudos on Opera for being on top of the ball and doing something about that. I'm not entirely convinced that we will see the end of shadow mining. And as a matter of fact, I think that the next version of what's that, BitTorrent, that it will have a shadow miner in it. That it'll have just a stripped down miner that's mining the BTT token or whatever. But because they're doing some really interesting things. One of them is that they called the token itself BitTorrent. See, I think by doing that, they're conceptually integrating the two together in the mind of the user. It's like if you're using BitTorrent, well, you're also using BitTorrent coin or BitTorrent token or whatever. Whether or not you're actually willingly or knowingly mining it, that's a whole different story. And so I'm predicting that if that is the case, unless they openly disclose, yes, we are going to be using, point something percent of your system's capabilities on mining. If you're running our software, you're going to be mining for us. Even if they make that disclosure, I imagine they are going to lose a great deal of users, and that people will use variants of BitTorrent that aren't BitTorrent. And I know there are several torrent applications out there, and that they'll probably switch to those instead. I think it's sad that people are still using coercion and fucking non-disclosures and omissions to kind of coerce, to work people into shit. It's like for quite a long time I was having these conflicts with Lightning Network advocates, where I was saying at one point or another they would be custodial. If they weren't custodial now, that they would be a custodial thing, and that you would not be a custodian, meaning that because it's a licensed activity, the people that can currently afford the licensure would be doing the whole custody ship. And like I said, I was having that conflict with people like maybe 2 years ago. And when you look about now with regard to Lightning Network, I keep getting complaints from other people that are actually using it that say it pretty much sucks. So, in addition to that, you have a plethora of custodial wallets popping up. Ooh, who didn't see that one coming fucking 8 billion miles away? Basically, people that weren't looking. That's my thought. It's like there's this mentality of dividing the whole community up. There really is no difference between a user and a miner and a developer. Really, the only difference is what you're doing right now. If all you got is a wallet and you got some fucking Bitcoin in it, then you're just a user. But if you're also mining it, now you're a miner and a user. And maybe in looking through your system and whatnot, you decide there's something you could do to augment your mining. Well, fuck, now you're a step away from a developer, because you're going to be having to root around in the code and reading your raw material coming back to you on your terminal and knowing how to do that. And so that'll call you into the direction of being a developer. So now you're a developer, a miner, and a user. But there's no licensure. And sure, there is a learning curve to all of them, but it's not quite as steep as a lot of people imagine. And I think when we're talking about cryptocurrencies in a segmented thing, like, the users will just use Lightning Network and the miners will mine, and, no. When you start talking about it in those terms, you start introducing kind of a semantic kind of cloud where it says, those guys over there do this, not us over here, we just do this, but those guys over there do that, and then those guys over there do that. And there really isn't any separation, because if you're using it, you're impacted what those guys over there are doing and those guys over there are doing. And if you're not paying attention, you end up getting baited and switched into some shit that was entirely dissimilar from what you signed up with. And we've seen this a million times in cryptocurrencies, where you're offered one service, it doesn't really turn out that they can provide that service, and so you're given kind of another service instead, and then you end up in court if you lost a significant amount of money, and nobody's really happy about it. And so, it's those things. When I hear people start talking about making changes to Bitcoin, like, let's make the blocks smaller. I've never heard anything so fucking retarded in my entire life. I mean, it's like this person whoever is suggesting it, and I happen to know at least one person who's cheerleading it, and I don't really take this person seriously because of it. It's like this person wasn't here between 2016 to 2018. It just wasn't here. Never had to pay a fucking miner fee over $20 for less than $100 worth of Bitcoin. A transaction involving that. Now, if that person had, they'd shut the fuck up about, let's make the block smaller. This effort to push it into third parties, you're not ready yet. You are not ready. You do not have the little app that you just fucking simply install and you put your fucking money on it and it just works. You don't have that yet. The only people that are providing even a synthesis of that are people that are probably not licensed to actually do it. Not in your state, not in your country. So it's only a matter of time before they are going to have to be licensed, and then all of a sudden it's going to cost them something to, collect all their AML, KYC bullshit, adhere to the custodial standards of their state and their country for that. It introduces a shit ton of additional expenses, and so all of a sudden they're going to have to charge you more on their transaction fees than they initially did, and you'll suck it up by then, right? You won't try and take your money and go somewhere else, right? Probably not, because you won't be able to get your fucking money back out. It'll be too expensive by then to get it out. People talk about Bitcoin being $250,000 a coin. Imagine what your transaction fees would be at $250,000 a coin. Right now it's creeping up over 50 cents. And Bitcoin's $3,600. Do the fucking math. We're talking about hundreds of dollars for a fucking transaction fee. You're not going to have any choice but to introduce the funds and then continually respend them back and forth without any hope of ever getting them out again. Because it's only going to get more expensive after that. And I believe that if we are still in a cryptosphere where there are multiple options, multiple altcoins to use, that people are going to experience this shit firsthand. And they're going to say, fuck Bitcoin! Fuck you! I don't want to pay fucking $100 for a fucking transaction fee. I did not get into Bitcoin in order to make some third party happy and rich off of my fucking transaction fees. That's specifically why I left my fucking bank. You know? And they're going to be looking around and they're like, well, fuck, I could be using Litecoin, I could be using Monero, I could be using Dogecoin, and I can do that. I could use Verge, I could use a million other fucking coins, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, whatever. I could use a billion other fucking coins, do the same exact thing, get the same exact service as fast, as secure, if not faster and more secure than is possible via LNs. And I'm not going to have to deal with this bullshit of this, $1,000 transaction fee to get my fucking money back out, to finally settle all my shit. So like I said, if there's options available at that time, and I like I said, Bitcoin gets back up over $10,000, there's going to be people bitching about transaction fees. Because not everybody's on board with this whole fucking Lightning Network bullshit. And I would be willing to wager that probably a majority of actual quote-unquote users, adopters, they aren't with it. And I say that because I know there's like millions of users, but there's still only like quote-unquote thousands of nodes. So it's more likely if you were to count those nodes up and you were to say, okay, if we were to cap it right here, we'd probably be able to get a significant amount of our transaction flow through, but you guys are going to have to get licensed because we're trusting you with our money. Yeah. And so anyways, as far as that goes, I wanted to get into this legislation because I've been hearing a lot about Wyoming lately. A lot of people saying that Wyoming doesn't exist or something like that. And it's led me to wonder, right? And so I got this piece of legislation in front of me here, SF 125, Digital Assets Existing Law. And yeah, so I'm kind of interested in it because supposedly it says something about the status of ownership of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies or something like that. Anyway, let's get into it. This is original Senate file SF-0125, Enrolled Act number 39, Senate 65th Legislature of the State of Wyoming, 2019 General Session. An act relating to property, classifying digital assets within existing laws, specifying that digital assets are property within the Uniform Commercial Code, authorizing security interests in digital assets, establishing an opt-in framework for banks to provide custodial services for digital asset wait a minute here, where'd it go? To provide custodial services for digital asset property as custodians, specifying standards and procedures for custodial services under this act, clarifying the jurisdiction of Wyoming courts relating to digital assets, authorizing a supervision fee, making an appropriation, authorizing positions, specifying applicability, authorizing the promulgation of rules, and providing for an effective date. Be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Okay. This promises to be tasty. I can tell already. Section 1. WS 3429-101 through 3429-105 and 34.1-1-210 are created to read. Chapter 29, Digital Assets. 3429-101, Definitions. A. As used in this chapter. 1. Digital asset means a representation of economic proprietary or access rights that is stored in a computer readable format and includes digital consumer assets, digital securities, and virtual currency. 2. Digital consumer asset means a digital asset that is used or bought primarily for consumptive, personal, or household purposes and includes A. An open blockchain token constituting intangible personal property as otherwise provided by law. B. Any other digital asset which does not fall within paragraphs 3 and 4 of this subsection. 3. Digital security means a digital asset which constitutes a security as defined in WS 174102A, and then some weird number, but shall exclude digital consumer assets and virtual currency. Okay, good. 4. Virtual currency means a digital asset that is A. used as a medium of exchange, unit of account, or store of value, and B. not recognized as legal tender by the United States government. B. The terms in paragraphs A2 through 4 of this section are mutually exclusive. 3429-102. Classification of digital assets as property, applicability to Uniform Commercial Code. A. Digital assets are classified in the following manner. Number 1. Digital consumer assets are intangible personal property that shall be considered general intangibles as defined in WS 34-1-9-102A only for the purposes of Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, Title 34.1, Wyoming Statutes. 2. Digital securities are intangible personal property and shall be considered securities as defined in WS 34.1-8-102A 15 and investment property as defined in WS 34.19-102A weird Roman numerals, only for the purposes of Articles A and 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code. Number 3, virtual currency is intangible personal property and shall be considered money, notwithstanding WS 34-10, only for the purposes of Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, blah, 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 Wyoming Statutes. B, consistent with WS 34.1-8-102A 6. A digital asset may be treated as a financial asset under that paragraph pursuant to a written agreement with the owner of the digital asset. If treated as a financial asset, the digital asset shall remain intangible personal property. It's intangible personal property anyway, and you can just stop right there. But anyway, continuing on. B, consistent with WS 34.18, digital asset may be treated as a financial asset. Okay, we already read that one. C, a bank providing custodial services under WS 34-29-104 shall be considered to meet the requirements of WS 34.1-8-102A. Let's see, 10, 11, 16. D. Classification of digital assets under this section shall be construed in a manner to give the greatest effect to this chapter, but shall not be construed to apply to any other asset. 34-29-103. Perfection of security interests in digital assets, financial statements. A. Notwithstanding the financial statement requirement specified by WS 34.1-9-310A as otherwise applied to general intangibles or any other provision of law, perfection of a security interest in a digital asset may be achieved through control as defined by paragraph EI of this section, or E1 of this section. A security interest held by a secured party having control of a digital asset has priority over a security interest held by a secured party that does not have control of that asset. Meaning, if the custodian has your keys, they can steal your funds. B. Meaning the state can coerce your custodian into giving them your funds. B, before a secured party may take control of a digital asset under this section, the secured party shall enter into a control agreement with the debtor. Ooh. So this is probably like about resolution of debts. Anyway, continuing on. A control agreement may also set forth the terms under which a secured party may pledge its security interest in the digital asset as collateral for another transaction. Yeah, they're talking about being able to take your funds and give it to somebody you owe money to because of some litigation. C, a secured party may file a financing statement with the Secretary of State, including to perfect a security interest in proceeds from a digital asset pursuant to WS 34.1-9-315D. D, notwithstanding any other provisions of law, including Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, Title 34.1, Wyoming statutes, a transferee takes a digital asset free of any security interest 2 years after the transferee takes the asset for value and does not have actual notice of an adverse claim. This subsection only applies to a security interest perfected by a method other than control. Smart contract, maybe. E, as used in this section. 1. Consistent with subsection F of this section, control is equivalent to the term possession. When used in Article 9, Title 34.1, Wyoming statute means the following. Wyoming statutes and means the following, A secured party or an agent, custodian, fiduciary, or trustee of the party has the exclusive legal authority to conduct a transaction relating to a digital asset, including by means of a private key or the use of a multi-signature arrangement authorized by the secured party. B, a smart contract created by a secured party which has the exclusive legal authority to conduct a transaction relating to a digital asset, as used in this paragraph. Quote, smart contract means an automated transaction as defined in WS 40-21-102A2 or any substantially similar analog, which is comprised of code, script, or programming language that executes the terms of an agreement, and which may include taking custody of and transferring an asset or issuing executable instructions for these actions based on the occurrence or non-occurrence of specified conditions. Number 2. Multi-signature arrangement means a system of access control relating to a digital asset for the purposes of preventing unauthorized transactions relating to the asset, in which 2 or more private keys are required to conduct a transaction or any substantially similar analog. Number 3, private key means a unique element of cryptographic data or any substantially similar analog which is A, held by a person, B, paired with a unique publicly available element of cryptographic data, and C, associated with an algorithm that is necessary to carry out an encryption or decryption required to execute a transaction. F, perfection by control creates a possessory security interest and does not require physical possession. For purposes of Article 9, Title 34.1 and this section, a digital asset is located in Wyoming if the asset is held by a Wyoming custodian, the debtor or secured party is physically located in Wyoming, or the debtor or secured party is incorporated or organized in Wyoming. Now I can see what they were talking about with regard to Wyoming Doesn't Exist. 34-29-104 Digital Asset Custodial Services. A bank may provide custodial services consistent with this section upon providing 60 days written notice to the Commissioner. The provisions of this section are cumulative and not exclusive as an optional framework for enhanced supervision of digital asset custody. If a bank elects to provide custodial services under this section, it shall comply with all of the provisions of this section. B. A bank may serve as a qualified custodian as specified by the United States Securities and Exchange Commission in 17 CFR 275.2064-2. In performing custodial services under this section, a bank shall, number 1, implement all accounting, account statement, internal control, notice, and other standards specified by applicable state or federal law and rules for custodial services. 2. Maintain information technology best practices relating to digital assets held in custody. The Commissioner shall specify required best practices by rule. So now they're going to tell your custodians how to store your funds. 3. Fully comply with the applicable federal anti-money laundering, consumer identification, and beneficial ownership requirements. And number 4, take other actions necessary to carry out this section, which may include exercising fiduciary powers similar to those permitted to national banks and ensuring compliance with federal law governing digital assets classified as commodities. C. A bank providing custodial services shall enter into an agreement with an independent public accountant to conduct an examination conforming to the requirements of 17 CFR 275.2064-2A, 4, and 6 at the cost of the bank. The accountant shall transmit the results of the examination to the Commissioner within 120 days of the examination and may file the results with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission as its rules may provide. Material discrepancies in an examination shall be reported to the Commissioner within 1 day. The Commissioner shall review examination results with receipt within a reasonable time and during any regular examination conducted under WS 13-3-702. D. Digital assets held in custody under this section are not depository liabilities or assets of the bank. A bank or a subsidiary may register as an investment advisor, investment company, or broker-dealer as necessary. A bank shall maintain control over digital assets while in custody. A customer shall elect, pursuant to a written agreement with the bank, number 1, of the following relationships for each digital asset held in custody. 1. Custody under a bailment as a non-fungible or fungible asset. Assets held under this paragraph shall be strictly segregated from other assets. Or 2. Custody under bailment pursuant to subsection E of this section. E. If a customer makes an election under paragraph 6.2 of this section, the bank may, based only on customer instructions, undertake transactions with the digital asset. A bank maintains control pursuant to subsection D of this section by entering into an agreement with the counterparty to a transaction which contains a time for return of the asset. The bank shall not be liable for any loss suffered with respect to a transaction under this subsection, except for liability consistent with fiduciary and trust powers as a custodian under this section. Meaning, if they space your funds, they're not liable. That's right, because the federal government nor U.S. Treasury is the issuer of the currency, and it cannot be redeemed back to you. Let's see here. F. A bank and customer shall agree in writing regarding the source code version the bank will use for each digital asset and the treatment of each asset under the Uniform Commercial Code, Title 34.1, Wyoming statutes if necessary. Any ambiguity under this subsection shall be resolved in the favor of the customer. Oh, okay. Holy shit. We got one benefit there. One spot where they're actually on our side. But that's in determining the ambiguity of their what they're doing here. Let's review that one really quick again. A bank and a customer shall agree in writing regarding the source code version the bank will use for each digital asset. Okay, so that means that if they're holding an asset for you and then there's a hard fork, you might have a little trouble getting your money back. Yeah, because you know the thing is the bank isn't actually responsible for your funds as indicated in Section E. G. A bank shall provide clear written notice to each customer and require with written acknowledgement of the following. Number 1. Prior to the implementation of any updates, material source code updates relating to the digital assets held in custody except in emergencies, which may include security vulnerabilities. 2. The heightened risk of loss from transactions under subsection E of this section. 3. That some risk of loss as a pro rata creditor exists as the result of custody as a fungible asset or custody under paragraph D2 of this section. 4. That custody under this paragraph D2 of this section may not result in the digital assets of the customer being strictly segregated from other customer assets. And 5. That the bank is not liable for losses suffered under subsection E of this section, except for liability consistent with the fiduciary and trust powers as a custodian under this section. Yeah, that's the problem though, dude. How do they make you whole when they space your fucking funds? H. A bank and a customer shall agree in writing to a time period within which the bank must return a digital asset held in custody under this section. If a customer makes an election under paragraph D2 of this section, the bank and the customer may also agree in writing to the form in which the digital asset shall be returned. That's interesting. That's interesting right there. Like if you agreed to a certain exchange rate at the beginning, you know, it's like, okay, if you let us hold your Bitcoin for 3 years, we'll give you 2 Bitcoin. You know, if they don't actually give it to you in actually Bitcoin, if they give it in like Lightning Bitcoin or some other shit like that, that could be something that affects it. Anyway, continuing on. J. All ancillary or subsidiary proceeds relating to digital assets held in custody under this section shall accrue to the benefit of the customer. Oh, okay, so you get your coins in the event of a fork, except as specified by a written agreement with the customer. Okay, so if by signing up with the bank, part of the thing is that if there's any fork coins, they get the coins, then you're stuck with that. The bank may elect not to collect certain ancillary or subsidiary proceeds as long as the election is disclosed in writing. A customer who makes an election under this paragraph D1 of this section may withdraw the digital asset in a form that permits the collection of the ancillary or subsidiary proceeds. Okay. So I guess that means that even if you are in contract with the bank, that you are allowed to withdraw the funds so that you could take advantage of fork coins that they aren't necessarily going to honor. So like, you know, in the case of Coinbase, where they're only now going to start honoring BSV coins, if you're holding Bitcoin Cash on there, this would, you know, prior to the fork, that this would apply to you. Anyway, continuing on. K. A bank shall not authorize or permit rehypothecation of digital assets under this section. The bank shall not engage in any activity to use or exercise discretionary authority relating to a digital asset except based on customer instructions. So they can't use your funds to go over and bet on crypto roulette if you specify that no, you can't actually use my funds for that. M. A bank shall not take any action under this section which would likely impair the solvency or the safety and soundness of the bank as determined by the Commissioner after considering the nature of custodial services customary to the banking industry. N. Banks are not subject to the annual report license tax levied under WS 17-16-1630 in lieu of this tax, and to offset the costs of supervision and administration of this section, a bank which provides custodial services under this section shall pay a supervision fee equal to 2/10 of 1 mil on the dollar. So that's like 0.0002 cents, relating to the assets held in custody under this section as of December 31st of this year, with payment of the supervision fee made on or before the following January 31st. The supervision fee shall be deposited by the Commissioner into the Financial Instructions Administration account and may be expended for any purpose authorized for that account. Banks providing custodial services outside of this section shall not be required to pay this supervision fee. O. The Commissioner may adopt rules to implement this section. P. As used in this section, bank as has the meaning ascribed to it in WS 13-1-101A1. 2. Commissioner means the banking commissioner. Number 3. Custodial services means the safekeeping and management of customer currency and digital assets through the exercise of fiduciary and trust powers under this section as a custodian, and includes fund administration and the execution of customer instructions. 3429-105 Jurisdiction of Courts. The courts of Wyoming shall have jurisdiction to hear claims in both law and equity referring to digital assets, including those arising from this chapter and the Uniform Commercial Code, Title 34.1, Wyoming Statutes. 34.1-1-210 Applicability of other sections. Chapter 29, Title 34, Wyoming Statutes shall apply to this title. Section 2, WS 13-2-101A6 is amended to read 13-2-101 generally. A. Each bank may 6. Operate a trust department and exercise all powers enumerated by WS 13-5-101B and 34-29-104. Section 3. If 219 House Bill 0074 is enacted into law, the entity created by 2019 House Bill 0074 may exercise all powers set forth in WS 3429-104 as created by this Act. Section 4. The Department of Audit is authorized to two additional full-time employees for the purposes of this Act. There is appropriated $175,604 of special revenue funds from the Financial Institutions Administration account to the Department of the Audit. This appropriation shall be for the period beginning with the effective date of this Act ending in June 30th, 2020. Section 5. This act is effective July 1st, 2019. So there you have it. Now I didn't see some of the language that I was anticipating. They didn't get really specific beyond custodial services with regard to what we were talking about prior to. But nonetheless, they probably have some sort of money transmission license or whatever too. So that's a whole different subsection of shit that they're trying to regulate on cryptocurrencies. Now, with regard to this, knowing what you know about cryptocurrencies, what is the likelihood that they will be able to effectively enforce this, or what's being stated here? I mean, because conceivably you could agree to things with people outside of your jurisdiction and agree to your own terms, and if they can't actually catch you in the act, then they're kind of fucked on that point. But what I'm seeing here with regard to this language, this is one of those things where it kind of redefines what a bank specifically can do with regard to cryptocurrencies and digital funds. But it does leave you a little bit of protection, a little more than you would anticipate. The only problem there is when it comes to enforcement. Say a bank does space your funds. If they don't actually have the funds on hand to make you whole with, kind of screwed. Now, it does say in here that a bank could act in their interest, which means they could probably give you somebody else's funds to make you whole or whatnot. But I don't know. I would have to review more of the associated text, or more of the text that this thing is actually associated with, to be able to be a little more clear on that. Honestly, I see this as being something that will kind of conflict with the intentions behind Lightning Network. I really do. I guess one of the problems that I have when I'm talking with people about this stuff is that I'm viewing it from somebody who's actually sat here and read this legislation and understands just a little bit of what they actually mean by what they're saying. And it's only because I've read other legislation, and that kind of gives you a flavor for the context in which they're speaking in. That's why I was pausing and annotating as we went along. And just so you know, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a lawyer. There could be some definitions here that have additional contexts that I wasn't aware of. It's entirely possible. And if you noted this, while we were going through it, it does refer back to several pieces of legislation that give this text additional context. So, yeah, something to keep in mind. You're not really getting the totality here, but we certainly got a little better picture than if we had just simply ignored the legislation and moved on with our day, And it is something to keep in mind, because this is stuff that they intend to at some point or another try to actually enforce on people. Now, how that's actually going to play out, I really couldn't tell you. From what I've seen, how this kind of legislation is treated in other countries, is that it's more or less ignored by everybody, and as everybody continues on doing what they were doing before, the government readjusts their position, because they're like, okay, well, my daughter actually was doing this too, and I don't want to get my daughter busted, so yeah, we're going to have to back off on this legislation. That's how it goes everywhere. I mean, kids are up to their ass in this stuff. So, it's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about cryptocurrencies, is that because there really isn't any age limit that's really enforceable here on the internet. I mean, there are some enforcement points that they've put out, but they're easily circumventable by an individual. And it's like, you really shouldn't have to be a criminal to do this shit. We weren't criminals when we started Bitcoin. We weren't criminals when we started altcoins. We shouldn't be treated as criminals in the future because of it, of any kind of legislation that's come out afterward, you know? Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down into some music. That was a little bit long-winded, even for me. And been wanting to put in some Megadeth. And so here it is. Last Rites, Love to Death, here on Coin Metal. And that was Soundgarden with Jesus Christ Pose. Yeah, I know he went a little bit over on that, but you know, hey, it was a pretty long piece of legislation. But you know what that really tells me is that, you know, it's like any entity that will make those kind of statements concerning, you know, what kind of responsibility or responsibilities they would expect people within the state operating within the state of Wyoming to have with regard to cryptocurrencies. You know, they act like they're going to do all that, and they're going to do some sort of enforcement of their will and their actions on that, right? And so when you look at it in terms of what's already happening and all of the legislation that actually exists right now, you can kind of see how serious they are about applying these things. Usually they're only busting low-level people. You know, they bust some individual for operating on what do you call it, local bitcoins, buying and selling Bitcoin in, you know, physical meetups. All right. Well, you know, that guy is probably moving maybe $1 million a year, maybe. You know, but nobody says dick to Tether about the billions of dollars worth of business that they're doing and that they supposedly represent, that nobody has had an actual audit of. You know, but they leave them alone. You know, oh, you guys are free to operate, you know. Give me a fucking break. It shows you that the disparity hasn't been fixed by cryptocurrencies. It has to some extent, in that the legislators that are reviewing this legislation and enacting this legislation, they happen to know just by reading it that it's going to apply to them, and not just them, their relatives, and other people that might actually be funding their election campaigns, possibly with even cryptocurrency earned funds. And so maybe enforcement isn't really such a good idea, right? Especially because it's not actually needed. The points that we are experiencing the most fraud and theft and whatnot, it's trackable. It's trackable publicly. We don't have to rely on the SEC or the CFTC to be issuing anybody subpoenas or banging down doors or anything like that. We can actually see all the economic activity going on the network, and by their wallet addresses judge exactly who's involved in what. You know, there's a lot of that going on with Quadriga these days, and rightfully so. There's a lot of people lost money in that one. 115,000 people, I believe. But the point being that cryptocurrencies really don't need regulation. What does need regulation is really being heavy on enforcing things like fraud claims, theft, and regardless of actually what entity is involved. I mean, you usually don't hear about things like with Wells Fargo or any of these other really big entities, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. Oh, by the way, they came out with JPM coin, I guess, or they're coming out with it soon. I think I've talked about that once or twice on this show. But anyway, the stuff is fully predictable. Anyway, I do have this article that I wanted to get into. It's on Cointelegraph here. And this is by Anna Alexander. This is authored supposedly around 6 hours ago. So no penis. Indonesia New legislation recognizes crypto as trading commodity. Indonesia has introduced new legislation that recognizes Bitcoin as a trading commodity. Asia-oriented news outlet KR Asia reported on February 15th. Indonesia's Commodity Futures Trading Regulatory Agency, also known as BAPEPTI, initially signed a decree to make cryptocurrency a commodity future legally tradable on stock exchanges last June. The agency then stated that the Indonesian government would soon release corresponding legislation regulating currency exchange companies, taxation, and other issues. Today, BAPEPTI reportedly approved Regulation Number 5/2019 that recognizes Bitcoin and other digital currencies as a trading commodity. The legislation thus gives legal certainty to cryptocurrency exchanges that have been already operating in the country. The new policy reportedly outlines a set of requirements in regard to any cryptocurrency circulating in Indonesia. Specifically, cryptocurrencies have to comply with risk assessment, anti-money laundering, and combating the financing of terrorism requirements. The policy also stipulates that cryptocurrency traders must keep transaction histories for at least 5 years and have a server located inside the country. Suck a dick! How about exchanges be required to do that? Yeah. Head of BAPEPTI Indrasari Winsnu Wardhana reportedly said that the introduction of the new legislation, the agency wants to, quote, give protection to people who want to invest in crypto assets so that they aren't cheated by fraudulent sellers. Dude, that's going to happen anyway. We just saw that with Quadriga. What the fuck? At the same time, head of Bank of Indonesia, BI Payment System Policy Department, Ani Janarko, stressed that BI still prohibits Bitcoin or crypto as a means of payment. Commodity is not an area of BI, but we are concerned about the above. Bitcoin brokers in Indonesia have become displeased with regulators following new capital requirements that were introduced last October. The new rules oblige brokers to have at least $70 million to launch futures trading. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I don't see this is going to be all that successful in India. I'm expecting what we've already seen as a trend, as displayed to us by China and the events going on there, that they're going to run into a wall, and they're going to have this instance where, you know, like a finance minister or a finance minister's daughter or a finance minister's son or somebody like that is going to come under some sort of regulatory scrutiny, and they're going to say, well, you know, maybe this isn't such a good idea after all, and so on and so forth. It always happens. It'll happen again. Always does. I can't wait for it to happen here in the United States. We've already seen some instances where Congress people and senators are disclosing the fact that they're invested in cryptocurrencies. It's because they probably expect that at some point in the near future they're going to come under some sort of regulatory scrutiny, and so they're already battening down their hatches. They're saying, "Hey, man, we're being transparent. We're disclosing all our funds. We're being compliant." Yeah. So anyway, I do have a couple of things I wanted to get into here. And that one's one, but there's another one that I wanted to get into. Indonesia, no, we already did that one. Here we go. This is an instance where all the regulation in the world does not protect you from people doing bad things with your money. And so here we go. This one's on Zero Hedge. Former Goldman banker faces extradition to U.S. in 1MDB case. This is by Tyler Durden, authored this 15th of February 2019, 1540 hours. Former Goldman banker Roger Ng has been sitting in a Malaysian jail cell since he was arrested in November and charged with abetting his employer's efforts to mislead investors in the 3 Goldman organized bond offerings that helped capitalize the doomed Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund, 1MDB, which is at the center of what the DOJ alleges was a more than $4 billion fraud. But soon, NG will find himself free on bail back in the U.S. now that the DOJ's extradition request has been granted by the Malaysian government. Ng I don't know how to pronounce that, NG, is facing charges of money laundering and bribery in the states that are similar to those which his former boss, former Goldman Southeast Asia chief Tim Leisner, pleaded guilty last fall. Leisner has agreed to cooperate with U.S. prosecutors to expose what he alleged was a, quote, culture of corruption at his former employer. Ng will return to the U.S. within 30 days, according to his lawyers. Probably isn't going to make it here. Tan Hock Chuan, Mr. Ng's lawyer, said on Friday that his client had reached an agreement with the DOJ for bail and has requested to return to the U.S. within 30 days. Mark Agnifilio, Mr. Ng's New York-based lawyer, told the Financial Times the former Goldman banker had waived extradition to the U.S. and that, quote, upon his arrival he will plead not guilty. Though Ng is facing a separate bill of charges in Malaysia, he was initially arrested in November at the behest of U.S. authorities. According to the Financial Times, his extradition is the latest sign that the DOJ's globally spanning graft investigation is starting to accelerate. The U.S. indictment against Mr. Ng accuses him of helping misappropriate more than $2.7 billion from 3 1MDB bonds arranged by Goldman Sachs in 2012 and 2013, totaling $6.5 billion. Authorities allege that Mr. Ng conspired with Joe Low, a Malaysian financier deemed to be at the heart of the 1MDB scandal, Tim Leisner, a former Goldman Sachs partner, and others to bribe government officials so the bank would win business advising the fund. Mr. Ng also faces criminal charges in Malaysia similar to those filed by the DOJ. Mr. Tan on Friday said it was up to the Malaysian government to decide how to proceed on it with its own charges against Mr. Ng. According to Bloomberg, Malaysia had dismissed Ng's application for bail, deeming him, quote, a serious flight risk. But since he will be free in the U.S., one can't help but wonder if he's in the process of negotiating a deal of his own with prosecutors, and, if so, what additional ammunition he might be able to hand the prosecutors as it becomes increasingly clear that the DOJ isn't focusing solely on the bank itself, but some of the former senior executives, including possibly Lloyd Blankfein himself. Yeah. Lloyd Blankfein will die of natural causes before he gets put in court over any of this shit. Mark my words. And as far as this 1MDB case, Mr. Ng will probably end up walking. He's probably got enough ammunition if he was able to misappropriate $2.7 billion worth of customer funds on his own. he's probably high enough up in the ladder that he can implicate a lot of other motherfuckers who will end up going to jail for teeny tiny things, if not just fined or censured or some shit like that, but not actually prosecuted. And yeah, we've seen how that all goes down. It's one of the reasons why cryptocurrencies are permissionless, is so we do not have this tier of bullshit over us, where somebody gets arrested and then he gets to walk while somebody lower goes to jail. You know, but we can see in the way that the U.S. government and others currently prosecute cases concerning cryptocurrencies, that they have absolutely no intention of holding the likes of Goldman Sachs accountable for anything. Why does Goldman Sachs exist as an entity? With them pulling off these multi-billion-dollar frauds, why are they allowed to do business in the United States? How is it possible that if the regulators really give a shit about the safety of our funds, that these known fraudsters and misappropriators would be continued to give a license to operate within our markets? How is that fucking possible? But no, they're going to bust your fucking neighbor for selling $350 worth of Bitcoin to somebody he met on the dark web. Because, you know, there might be some money laundering going on there. Give me a fucking break. You know, I believe that once things go Lightning Network, which they may in fact go with regard to Bitcoin, I don't expect it to last all that long. I really expect that the change in the power dynamic and the change of incentives will hopelessly corrupt the processes of Bitcoin, and that altcoins that can deliver on the promise of Bitcoin will end up getting their market share. That's all there is to it. You know, we've already seen where how the market responds to these kinds of pressures. I mean, the spike that we saw in Bitcoin didn't just happen in Bitcoin, it happened in altcoins too, as people figured out they could not afford to transact their Bitcoin as Bitcoin. So they said, well, fuck. How the fuck am I going to do my transactions if I can't do them in Bitcoin? Because the fucking transaction fee fluctuates somewhere between $5 and $50. No, fuck that. I'll transact in Dogecoin. I'll move $500,000 for 0.5 cents. And I'll do it because I can do it reliably and quickly. And I don't need a third-party intermediary that requires licenses and registration and insurance and all this other bullshit that hyperinflates the cost of the services that they can give to me. You know, people wonder why Bitcoin was designed the way it was. Well, that's exactly why. So you did not need third-party intermediaries that could both steal your funds and get fined by your government, thus increasing the price to you and making the service that much more exclusive. You know, it's one of the things that the people that want to do that to Bitcoin don't really consider, is that if you are actually put under those kind of pressures within Bitcoin, wouldn't you be that much more tempted to use a currency that you could use without that friction? I know I would, and now you understand why there are Bitcoin maximalists. Personally, I believe they are all hired by banks to do and say what they do and say. Anyway, it is with that I'd like to close this episode out. We will be back again on Monday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. Watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is qualified to do it for you. Thank you very, very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. Until Monday, you'll be able to find me on Twitter and on Facebook. Also, just look up the hashtag CoinMetal. You'll be able to find all kinds of stuff. Also, I'll be in the Discord and Telegram channel for Verge Currency. And so until Monday, you'll have an excellent weekend. As far as our last dance is concerned, let's look at our assessed time here. What we got left? About 3.5 minutes. You know, I've been wanting to play some Static X. We have not played any Static X tonight. And so, Wayne Static. I don't know. That one's a little bit short. Maybe if I just like chew some air for just a moment or two, we can lock it down. You can do it. Come on. All right. Fuck it. Around the Turn. Last Dance. Here on Coin Metal.